Now, Mr. Johnson, here, what is the second page of this rental agreement? What's the function of this page?
This is the actual contract, what they can and can't do. Mentions fueling up the truck at the beginning. It also explains late fees, drop-off fees, or if they were to use any of the budget Easy Pass items. Okay. And then they would sign for the rental right here.
And I know that you're facing the screen, so it's a little tricky, but if you wouldn't mind just making sure to project your voice just so the people, the jurors in the back, it's all right. The jurors in the back can hear you. Now, you explained that you go over the terms and conditions. Is that something that takes 15 seconds to do?
It's only a couple of minutes. It's actually not that hard to go over it because the main parts of it are they got to return the truck full of fuel for the top line. Then the next section is just a bunch of wording on they're waiving the right for insurance. And it explains which insurances they did not or did purchase. On this one, they didn't purchase any insurance.
Okay.
And then it goes down into drop-off fees, late fees, and the plate pass for toll roads. Fine, right there.
Now, throughout what we see on the second page of that agreement, there are various spots where initials can be placed.
Correct. Okay. 4 initials and then 1 signature from the customer.
Okay. And so in reading through that paragraph, it would be your job to make sure that the person is putting their initials at every appropriate spot, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so as you're going through page 2 of that agreement, was that being done at every appropriate spot?
Yes.
We'll move on to page 3 of that agreement. All right. Now, Mr. Johnson, what is the function of this third page for the rental process?
This page is just showing all the late fees that could occur if it was not returned on time, if they went over on mileage, or any other additional fees that could accrue, which is located on the right side. And then the customer signature is there, and then the dealer initial for us is located on the left.
Okay, and we'll just zoom in a bit. So there's a number of different lines. Fair to say that there are various types of penalties that can accrue if you don't follow the terms of the agreement. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And as you're going over that, on this particular date, was that understood based on how you went through that agreement?
Yes.
You mentioned that there's on the bottom right side of the agreement, there's a signature that appears.
If that is the customer signature, that they understand all the possible fees and charges for any additional.
Okay. And we'll move on to page 4 of the agreement. Now, Mr. Johnson, here what we see on page 4, what's the function of this particular portion?
This is the insurance page showing that they're waiving all of the insurances. Various types, insurance for the truck, liability, roadside, and towing if they had any.
Okay.
And shows that they denied all of it, and then up here is our rental agreement, and then insurance company and policy number of the person renting the truck.
Okay. And again, a little tricky, but just make sure that you keep your voice up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's all right. So this actual document, the title of this document that we see on page 4 of the agreement, what is the title of this?
Personal Financial Responsibility Certificate.
And you mentioned insurance. How do you verify if that person that's renting the vehicle has insurance?
All they do is write their information there. And then budget, if anything happens, budget goes for that. We don't do it ourselves. We just go off of what the customer puts up there.
Okay. So in terms of understanding financial responsibility in renting this particular vehicle, was there anything that was left unclear during this rental process on that day?
They sign at the bottom once they've gone through all of this.
And on that particular day, for the person that rented this vehicle known as Leticia Stauch, were there any questions about the financial responsibility she was undertaking that day?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And we'll move on to the last page of that agreement. May have to rotate this one, so it's a little clear for you to read. There we go. Thank you. Right. Now, this is the last page of that agreement. Mr. Johnson, what is the function of this fifth and last page?
This is just to show the damages of the truck as we rented it, so that when it gets to the other location, we have a record of what it looked like before and or after something were to have occurred. Also includes the mileage of the vehicle when we rent it.
Now, in terms of assessing the damage, is that done only by you, or is that done with the renter as well?
That's done with us. We check it all when it comes in, and then mark it all. This one just looks like it just had some typical light scraping, like it brushed against a tree. No actual physical damage to it at all.
Okay. And in terms of acknowledging any sort of defects in that particular rental vehicle, whose signature appears in the middle of that page?
We're talking this one or down here?
We'll start with the first spot.
That one is budget rep initial, so that would be mine.
Okay.
Looks like whoever rented it also accidentally initialed there, which is common. And then this is the renter's signature and then the date.
Okay. Thank you. You can turn around. Throughout this process, as you were renting this vehicle, you had an opportunity to interact with the person that identified themselves.
Correct.
Okay. And how did that person identify themselves? By what name?
Leticia Stauch.
Okay. And would you recognize that person if they were here today in court?
Probably not, due to the number of trucks I'd rented before and or after it.
And the number of years that have passed?
Yes.
Okay. Throughout that interaction that you had with the person that identified themselves as Leticia Stauch, was there any uncertainty that you had based on renting cars as to whether or not they understood the rules and conditions that applied?
No, I had no concerns with that. Everything seemed pretty normal.
Okay. Had you ever experienced a time where you didn't feel comfortable renting out a car to someone?
Yeah, I had customers that have come in and can smell alcohol on their breath, so we didn't rent them their vehicle that day.
Okay. And in terms of having general concerns about whether or not they understood the agreement, would you have stopped that process at that time?
If there were any issues like that, like concerns that I would have for it, yes.
Okay. And in terms of the responsibility that you undertook as a representative of budget on February 1st of 2020, did you have any concerns as to whether or not the person that presented themselves as Leticia Stauch understood the terms of that rental agreement?
I had no concerns with that, no.
As we went through People's Exhibit 239, there were a number of initials and signatures that appeared on that document.
Correct.
Were those initials and signature consistent with the same person?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that name?
Leticia Stauch.
And the initials that we would have seen that you've gone through throughout that document, were those initials consistent as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination, Mr. Cook.
I don't have any questions, Your Honor.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Looks like we have one. You would repeat that and counsel approach, please. Mr. Johnson, when was the budget rental van reservation made? On what date?
We don't have that information on here. It just shows the day that they picked up the truck that they had reserved.
Where was the van to be turned in on February 5 of 2020?
It was due in Grapevine, Texas, on East Dallas Road.
And what Was this a local rental or a one-way rental?
It was a one-way.
Right.
Pick up here and drop off in Texas.
I will allow reasonable follow-up as to those questions only. Prosecution?
Mr. Johnson, you just explained the drop-off location.
Correct.
Who selects that location?
They do when they reserve it, unless they come in without a reservation.
Okay. And is there another opportunity for them to drop off that vehicle at other locations?
Typically what budget has is if you're dropping off like in one city, as long as it's within like 50 miles of the original location, it can be dropped off there with no additional fees or charges.
And if a renter chooses to drop that off at a different location, all those penalties, fines, surcharges, et cetera, may come into play at that point?
Correct. And there could also be additional, like if you're dropping it off 1,000 miles from where it's supposed to, they would charge additional costs based on distance.
Thanks.
Mr. Cook? Follow-up?
Can you tell, or do you know where the truck was ultimately dropped off?
Not from this paperwork. Budget would actually have to give the log for it, but I don't have that here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Prosecution, call your next witness. Well, hold on. Counsel, approach, please.
Call Sergeant Roy Ditzler.
Sergeant Ditzler, if you would step forward, raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about giving this man will be the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
Morning.
Morning, sir.
Please state your name, spell your last for the record.
Yes, my name is Roy A. Ditzler, Ditzler.
What's your occupation?
I am a sergeant with the Colorado Springs Police Department.
How long have you been with the Colorado Springs Police Department?
February of this year was 21 years for me.
Congratulations.
Thanks, sir.
What are your current duties?
Currently, as of mid to late January, I was assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force, which investigates drug organizations, large-scale drug organizations.
Sounds pretty exciting, but we're not going to talk about that now. Let's talk about what you were doing back in January of 2020.
Yes, January of 2020, I was assigned to Colorado Springs Police Department's Metro Vice Intelligence Task Force, or unit, and I was the supervisor of the intelligence unit.
And what does the intelligence unit do?
So I was responsible for coordinating and allocating resources for undercover operations, surveillance activity, conducting investigations that involve threats to city government entities, law enforcement entities, domestic terrorism incidents. I was also assigned as a joint terrorism task force officer with the FBI at that time.
Back on January 31st of 2020, were you asked to assist in the investigation of the disappearance of Gannon Stauch?
Yes, I was. I was asked by my lieutenant at the time, John Koch, to reach out and contact Detective Abensham with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. I was informed that he needed assistance or assets from our division for surveillance activity.
Were you also asked to place a GPS device on a vehicle?
Yes, sir. As part of that surveillance activity, I was asked to affix a GPS tracker to a vehicle. Yes, sir.
And what is a GPS tracker?
GPS tracker is like a magnetic device. They vary